hello to everybody that is tuning in. How are you, Your Grace?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. As everybody's getting settled and we're getting ready to start, I'm going to take care of a little housekeeping. So, everybody that is watching, please ask questions by all means. His Grace is happy to answer anything that you may have. Well, anything on topic. I can't promise he'll answer anything that you may ask. So, please feel free to ask away. Um, I think that's about it. If we can't get to anything and everything, it's not personal, it's just a matter of time. So, my part of things is pretty simple and easy, and that means I'm going to pass it off to you to take it away.
Hey, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so this evening we're discussing wraps, tips, and tells. Okay, so wraps, self-explanatory. It's the technique, all sorts of things about that. Tips are just general little tips about different things, different aspects of fighting. And tells are telegraphs, things that you do that you don't want to that warns your opponent, or things that they do that they don't want to that warn you about things happening. So let's get into wraps. So wraps are a really neat little weapon. Um, they give you a chance to hit somewhere where you normally can't hit with a forehand blow. They make another set of options that you have that your opponent has to guard against. And it gives you a little more offensive variety, especially if you get in a system like mine where everything fits together and you can change a wrap into 5 or 6 other different things. The problem with the wraps, well, for all this wonderful utility they have, you have to pay a price for it. They're slow, not slow going in, but going out. Well, they are slow going in if you're out of range, because you have to step in before you can throw it. And if you just step in and throw a wrap, you probably won't even get to the point where you throw it. You'll get hit. There are ways to disguise this, but we'll talk about that a little later. Okay, so definitions of a wrap. It's a forehand blow which turns into a back edge strike. But in the middle of that, the sword hand has to stop moving or slow down considerably. So if I'm swinging, I can't just swing into that and call that a wrap. The hand has to stop before the tip of the sword gets to the hand. So if the sword's here when the hand stops, too late. The reason for that is the physics involved. You generate power pretty much like everything goes. You have a weight shift to your body. You can actually have your weight drop. You can step forward during the backswing and sort of torque your body to unwind into the wrap. But the power really, that's the generation of the power. What's really important with the wraps is you do something to magnify the power. So I'm swinging in a wrap, and I don't throw straight in wraps like that. I throw them as a chop because you want to create a circular path. So you swing here, you have a radius of the circle or the curve that your sword is moving, which is the distance between your center of mass and the sword's balance point. So right now we've got 18, 20 inches. At the point your hand slows down greatly or stops, that becomes the center of rotation. So it moves from your center of mass to your hand. Well, not precisely the hand, actually, the position the hand now occupies. And the radius goes from this 18 inches to 20 inches to the distance between your hand and the balance point of the sword. It gets a lot smaller. And the laws of physics make the sword speed up just to balance the equation. So if you never stop your hand, so right here, you just let your hand turn over and the sword turn over, you never change this radius. It just gets longer and longer and longer and longer until it gets there. And you've probably got less power at the end than you had halfway through. I call that a snap wrap, where you throw a snap and you turn your hand over. It's not a wrap at all. And because of this lengthening of the radius, you're probably going to lose 20, 30% of the power you had in the first place. Just as a side note, you see people who actually come in and they raise their hand up so the tip comes in behind things. There's a problem with that too. Now, I don't know enough geometry, but my squire, who's an ex-rocket scientist, does. There are things called vectors. It's just force moving in a direction. So if I'm punching you, I have force moving in a horizontal vector in that direction. If I'm swinging the sword, I have a certain amount of weight moving along a circular vector. If I push my sword up, I have a vertical vector. That's the problem. The vertical vector sucks power from the rotational vector. So when you do this, I have no trouble just stopping my sword right there, an inch from their head, with no effort at all. You're simply losing a lot of force, and that's why so many of those go, well, it hit, but it didn't feel good. The other thing that is not a wrap is a back edge blow. It's one where you turn your hand over all the way back here and you start coming in like this. And when you do that, usually the people that do it are still pushing that hand when it hits. Now, the problem with that is you've got your arm extended, something stops your sword, your body is still pushing into that, and the elbow is what pays the price. It gets caught in between two. One thing's pushing it, the other thing's holding it from going forward, and you get a pop in your elbow. This probably won't happen the first time, but give it a chance. It will eventually. And they're not wraps because they just start out back edge, you know, so they're not getting any of that increased power as it goes on into the actual swing. Now, wraps, if you're not already in range, they're a little hard to set up. You have to pretty much step into range to throw the wrap. If you just simply step in, you've got a lot of ground to cover before anything actually threatens your opponent. So entering with a combination is probably better. I use a combination that starts with what I call a slide step. This is a simple little technique. Well, it's not easy to do, but it's easy to tell people about. Is you start your sword swinging, and then when the weight starts to shift to your front foot, you raise it up. Now, when I use this at the beginning of an attack, I don't come in far enough to hit the person. So I don't. You'll notice my sword tip is about a foot out. I can get close enough. If you see a full speed snap coming at you and it's a foot away from your head, you're going to block it. I mean, you have to be awful damn good to just say, oh, that's not going to hit me, because if I leaned, it would. So I'll throw this thing like this, and then I'll pull it back like this. It's like pulling it back to a high thrust. But as I do that, I'm going to come forward. And that allows me to torque the body and take a step to power the wrap. And what I usually do is I throw something called a right cross. It's a snap where you try to hold the blade vertical, and you swing it sort of sidearm so it heads across towards the sword side of the body. So it comes through here looking like a snap, more or less, same speed, and it ends up over here, hitting the shield edge, hitting the sword hand, or the sword near the sword hand, following up anything that's coming that way. And since you started out of range, there likely isn't anything coming that way. Let's do a sidetrack here, and we'll talk about what moves first. So you're stepping into your opponent. If anything moves before the sword starts swinging, that's a tell. Because nothing else can hurt you but the sword. The sword is the only thing that's a threat. sure, walking into range creates a probable threat. Sword moving creates a threat, no doubt about it. I might be doing something ungodly, wicked with the sword that allows me to hit you from 5 feet out of range. You don't know. But if the sword moves, you've got to pay attention to it. So when I'm doing this, I start the snap. I put all the power into it by here, and then the sword moves in. And then as I'm retreating my back or recovering my back foot, I'll take another step and push my shield into that sword hand that I just immobilized. And then I'm going to swing, go into the wrap. And since my hand is out from the shoulder, when I do step in, it's going to be a slightly curved path, like I'm simply chopping a tree like this. Okay, let's back up just a little bit. For one, I didn't tell you a story that I like. So talking about the sword moving first. So the story is there's a pig and a chicken that are going to go into business together and start a restaurant. And they're discussing what to serve. And the chicken says, I'd like to serve breakfast. And the pig says, I don't want to serve breakfast. Chicken says, why not? And the pig says, well, if we serve breakfast, you're involved, but I'm committed. The sword's the only pig in the game when you're swinging in an attack. You have to, that has to move before anything really makes any difference. If I see you taking weight off one of your feet, I may not be there when you swing that sword. Or I'll be doing something you'd rather me not do. So let's go back, now that I told my story. Yeah, now that I've told my story, let's go back to the snap itself. Or the wrap itself, excuse me. Now I'm going to angle the sword down a little bit so you can see what's going on. I've taken a step. My body is going to start dropping like this. This is if you get into one of the real big snaps. I'll get into the other ones later. I start leaning so forward towards the point that my hand is going to stop. Not the body, towards the point. And I don't turn sideways. I lean right forward towards that point. So I'm going down, all my weight is dropping, it's accelerating the blade. So the hand gets to that point and stops. This is one of the things that's good about having that little circular path here instead of a straight path. If it gets to the end of the straight path, it's quite likely just going to yank your elbow out and pop it. Not fully one time, but the next 100 or 200 wraps you throw, it'll get you. So this is coming out. And so the force is coming sideways on my arm. And it's really easy just to stop my hand. Now you don't turn the hand over. You let the sword turn it over. So I swing the sword when I'm holding on to my two little fingers like that. So if I just stop them, the sword will take that over and just turn it like that. I don't have to do it. Actually, I'm going to let go of my fingers and I'll still turn my hand over. If you have trouble with actually turning your hand over completely like this, you can switch your grip between the bottom two fingers to a thumb and forefinger right when it turns over. So it'll take some strain off your wrist if you don't quite have your technique down. Now, when you get there and it turns over, the biggest mistake people make is moving their hand. Okay, so if I'm swinging like this, the hand stops, the radius decreases to its minimum possibility, goes around, and then I start moving my hand, the radius starts increasing. And it's so bad, I can actually throw a full powered wrap and stop it, just simply by pushing my hand across. So watch this again. Full powered wrap, and it stops. So the way you stop that, well, you can just train yourself not to. But what you do is you place an object on the ground, preferably with some kind of band, like a pole or something like this. And you step in and you stop your hand right on that pole. Right when the sword hilt goes past that, you stop your hand. So it turns over, and right when it turns over, right here, you do a palm strike. Palm strike is like this, where you hit with the base of your palm. So it turns over and you just push down, and that really, really helps to stop the sword. So that's your wrap. Now you got the other hard thing to realize is that's not your target. This is your target. Not there, but here. Because if you lean into here, you don't really get much weight going towards that. It's not going to add power to your blade. So if you do it, this is the wrap here. Here like this, and it's down. Fast. Now this is a big step in wrap. You don't get these very often. It's hard to get in there. But if you do, it becomes really useful because I'm going to show you 6 different variations of that thing, all of which go through the point where the hand stops. So you don't have to swing high to get a high snap. You can, but you don't have to. So your hand, when it stops swinging, it creates a what they call a plane of rotation. A plane is like a flat surface. So if I have a flat surface like the top of a table, the blade is swinging on it. That's a horizontal plane of rotation. If I'm swinging down like this, then the plane of rotation ends up here. So I'm not even going to hold the thing, it's just going to come up here like this. So you can come up here like this, come down with every indication you're throwing a low wrap. Your tip has to go down almost to the ground, but it comes up here. That's a rising one. I don't call it a rising one, it's just inclined to come up. Now you can throw the horizontal one's fine, you know, same game. You can also throw it so it goes down. Now, if you're throwing a high wrap over a shield, it has to. And what you do when you throw in the high wraps, you sort of take your arm out like you're going to chop, but you're going to chop about 6 inches past the target. So I don't turn it over here, I turn it over here. And then it just goes down. And you can vary these things. You can vary it from an almost vertical. You don't want to throw verticals and miss. So I can change it from a vertical to horizontal. Just something that goes down. It's just a matter of the initial way you make your sword move. If you're one of these guys that likes to stand on the edge of range and snipe at people, this is a really nice little wrap. You just come in just like this, aiming for just above the knee, and it turns over. It comes right under the shield point. There you go. Okay, now this is the big wrap if you can get down there. Now, if you can get down there, like I said, there are like half a dozen different variations that go right through that point, and they're very effective. One of my students got knighted a few years ago, and he says if he can get in to a point during the fight one time to get into where he can throw that big wrap, even if it doesn't hit, he says, I've won the fight. All I have to do is threaten now. And they'll go after that, and then you hit them somewhere else with it. But we'll get to that in a bit. You actually can throw the wrap from out of range and make it turn over right. You just have to really be careful of where the tip versus the hand is. So we talked about the snap wrap, so the tip gets ahead of your hand. So you can actually be all the way out, step into here to where you're actually going to hit and throw a wrap. What I do is I aim out here. So you figure out where your hand has to be, where the sword has to be, by slow. You're in there like this, take that thing there, you see where it has to go to come around and hit. Now snaps work better if you can get it to hit almost to a right angle, but they're still pretty good if you do it right. So I can come in here and step in and throw out to there and get a wrap. Whereas if I just swing a snap and turn it over, it simply doesn't work very well. Duke Steinar, name's gone out of my mind, one of the Northern Kingdoms. He has a couple of videos out. He's doing a real good job of demonstrating that particular wrap. Now here are a few problems. Way back when, they used to throw things they call sky wraps or scorpions or something like that. I never did, because one of my rules is you do not raise your elbow over the plane of your shoulders. You can turn, and that turns the plane. So while you are generating power, you don't have your elbow up there, because then you're generating power just with your arm, no cords involved, and it'll hurt you. So what they did, they did it correctly. So they threw the thing down here, so they had all the power, the elbow still blow. Then they let their hands fully extend their arms. I'm going to actually sit down in my chair so you can see what this thing is doing. So they've thrown this wrap, and they throw it straight up. The arm comes here, it hits the end of its tether, which is the length of the arm itself. That's when the elbow gets that pop, and then the blade turns over. You hit really hard and you hit really fast. But the trouble is, you don't have to use really good biomechanics to make this technique work. You can have horrible technique, as long as you can get the thing to hit hard enough in the right place, it can work, as long as your arm lasts. So that's two things that you got to watch out for: the arm fully extending and the elbow coming over the shoulder. Like if you want to throw a high wrap and you raise your arm up here and then try to throw it, that's all arm. You really want your core down here to be supplying the power. So if you want to do that, all you have to do is lean the other way, and then the elbow's still under the shoulder, and you throw it in the same place. The other thing you don't want to do is you don't want to throw your wrap and then yank it back like this. Sometimes that'll work. If you don't have your arm moving in the right way at the right time, you get another one of those pop the elbow. Now, it's sort of ironic that the wrap I teach, this wrap I've just shown you, is not the one I first started using. Matter of fact, I used to do the other one about 20 years. Not very much. It wasn't a big part of my game, but I used it. And that was like this. I would throw, just like I'm throwing a snap, but just a little bit sidearm. And right here, before it really came out and pulled, I'd pull sideways like that. Now, my arm always remained bent. I timed it so it was really, really smooth. And it would just come in and catch you right. And it's really, if you were charging at me, this was a really nasty thing, because I could throw that falling backwards and it would work. I think one of the few events I actually fought in just before I actually retired, so mid-late 60s, I killed my last opponent with that. And I had been fighting so much I could barely stand up. Which is another ironic thing, because I was in such good shape when I started playing that I didn't get tired for probably the first 2 years I was in the society. Then I had to stop and rest a little bit. So the reason I started using the new one, I was Sir Bran McClellan, or Viscount Bran McClellan of the West. He's the brother of Duchess Bryn. So he was my student, and we were working on these coming in from really long distances, taking really long steps and getting in range just so it hit the shield, and then you could come in and do the next thing as you continue to move forward. So I'm standing there with this knight from one of the Eastern Kingdoms, and we're watching Bran fight somebody. And he's out about here. And he does this sort of leaping, flying thing like this, and then throws this wrap, which is exactly the one I do. Now, so you put all your weight towards the point. So like if you're in here like this, oh, we'll get to that. Throw all your weight to that point and just stop your hand on that little curved chopping path, and it comes in. And he's just throwing thunder, boy. And the night I'm talking to him, he was somewhere in the south, and he turns to me and says, "If I come out to the west and fight, do I have to hit that hard?" And I said, "Yeah, pretty much." So things have changed a little bit. Okay, so I think this is where, anybody happen to have any questions out there? Because I'm going to go into the
No,
very.
no questions. No questions so far.
Okay, so the way my system causes variations is you make the sword move in the same path as the original technique. So all of these variations I'm going to show you. Oh, we'll back up just a second. Forgot to cover how you throw a wrap when you're already inside. So you're in here, shield to shield. Remember I said I like this position to throw my wrap? I like this position where my hand's a little bit. So if I've come in, I've ended up here like this. My weight has come towards my left side. My arm is just exactly in the right position when it hit. And so I just lean into my opponent and move my weight towards where I'm going to throw the blow. So basically sort of jump a little bit in that direction. If you're not in that position, you can actually just do a little squat over here that won't be any good. And then swing your sword back and throw your weight in that direction. And it works really nice. Here like this. My son, Sir Brian, can actually throw with both hands. He fights two swords a lot. He likes to fight really inside a lot. I tend to like to be out a little further because I can't do that. Just never bothered to train myself. Okay, so back to the variations. So all these variations that I'm going to do on the wrap, they're variations off that big step-in wrap, and they can be done on things where you don't commit yourself quite that fully. So let's say we'll start here like I just hit something. So I'm coming in, looks like a wrap, doesn't it? Okay, so instead of coming in and stop it and let it hit, I let the hand continue on that path. In this occasion, I'm turning my blade back edge, just like a wrap. But I come up here and then I sword hole an A. So it's here like this, up, like that. And this thing is ungodly fast. So you're here like this, you go. It's probably just a split second from when it would have hit in the first place.
We do have a question.
Yes.
What is your favorite counter to these various wraps?
You must step into them. If you can get it before, if you can get everything going before it actually, you fully actualize the thing, it's not going to be any good anyway.
Thank you.
And I do punch blocking with my shield. So instead of being in here and just turning my body like this, I'll come out and get it. So I just aim right for about here. And I'll probably pick it up somehow or the other. The other way is you can step to the other side of the body. It's the same sort of thing. Of course, if you just catch a tail and step out of range, it works really nice. But I'm in here like this, and Mr. Pell's going to come over here and wrap me. So as I see his arm coming around the back of his head, I move into here. And basically has to reach all the way around his shield to actually do anything to me. But I really just like the variant where I just punch things because this is getting a little off topic, but when I'm using the punch block, I can make the blade I block react in different ways. One of which is I block it and it comes right into your face, or it goes back out real hard to the side, or it just stops dead in the air right in front of you. So having that at my disposal, I can do nasty things to you if I can catch any kind of tell it's that you're doing that thing. And that little thing called the J shot, that is actually a fairly decent version of a wrap. People turn it into a back edge thing, which they shouldn't, but a lot of them just throw it down and let it come up, and that's pretty much what I teach. But you don't let them have to get in that position either. I mean, I've heard people say, well, just get your body out of the way. Sorry, if you are fighting people that are slow enough that actually works, you got to get in the bigger pool. Okay, so that's the Molinet. The nasty thing about the Molinet, since all my techniques sort of fit together, so I was talking about the other week about the two teardrops, and I have one that comes down here and turns into an offside teardrop. You know where I want to swing it. Well, when you come around with that Molinet, you don't have to hit with it. So I've come in here like this. I've come into my wrap down here, come into the Molinet, and I come right down there and back to the side. We're getting a little silly now. I don't usually like to put a second version of the thing on top of the first one, because eventually somebody will say shenanigans, just swing, and that pretty much stops things. But that Molinet is awful fast. The next one, it doesn't work so well on the close-in heater form because it targets, you're coming in for a wrap on this side. This technique targets the ribs on the other side. And if you got a closed form heater, pretty much you have static blocks for that areas. But if you're doing it like I do, where we fight out like this, it's a real nice little technique. Call it the X shot, because it's exactly what it's doing. If you imagine an X in front of you like this, the first part of the blow, that's the wrap, is going to come up this arm of the X. And then it's going to go through and then curve around and come back the other way. So I'm here and I step into my wrap. Opponent follows me down. This time I don't turn over and back edge. I change my shoulder and elbow, pull them in like that, and I come up front edge. Right when they get to here in front of my face, I stop my hand. Now again, that's a curved thing, so it's not just pulling it out, and it's really easy to stop. And right at that, somewhere in there, I'm going to take a step to that side. So it's coming up like this, and it hits right here. Coming up here like this, and it's right here. Basically, you just stop your hand. You stop your hand, and you let the elbow follow the curve. Hand stays there. This just changes the angle of your forearm. That's a nasty move against somebody fighting my open form heater style, open form round. Like I said, it doesn't really work on the closed form, but we have a different variation of that. So again, I'm doing the same thing, exact same move. I step in, turns to front edge, and instead of bringing it up so it's right in front of my face, as I step over there, I bring it right in front of my shoulder over here. Now, I can retain the swing and just swing at something, but I don't have to swing down here. I can come up and swing up there. Gives you just a little bit more time while it's coming around the back like that to do it. And both of those techniques can actually, well, I'll talk about that later. We call this the S. So the other one was an X, where it describes an X while it's being thrown. This one describes a capital S sort of on the diagonal. Big loop around here, small loop up here going somewhere. Now, like I said, I'm showing you half a dozen of these variations. I'm not suggesting you should go out and learn all of them. Pick one or two. Just pick one for the time being. Then you want to get something that fakes too. So, you know, if it looks like it's that first variation, it might not be that first variation. Of course, they all look pretty much the same until my hand gets past here. Okay, the next one is a fake X shot. So I've come in, again, with a big wrap, coming up front edge like this. But this one I can actually come up back edge. And your opponent really is going to have trouble telling which edge is coming up on. So I actually like to turn in the back edge. Come in like this, take that step across, then I pull it back into a thrust. Come like this, or excuse me. Come like this, right here. And a variant of that actually is you come in and do that same thing, and then you can miss. So if you watch it from this side, okay, so I've come in there, I've come up like this, I moved over here, but instead of coming into here, I'm going to miss it like this. And that goes right into the mold. And pretty much your opponent has to make their decision as to which technique I'm using with the sword right about here. Or actually right about here. So the thrust is 6 inches away from your nose, and you've got to tell whether it's a thrust or something else. That's not a good situation. Okay, this next one actually works in certain circumstances. I think it's sort of amusing, actually. And it's probably something I wouldn't take in my, we're going to really use this for sure type arsenal, but it's fun. I actually have made it work, make it work. So you come in, you step your wrap, come in here like this. Now, again, you're going to come up that same path, back edge and everything. But right when the thing comes up, you sort of rise up on the toes of your right foot. And then you go into a Molonaise, you step sideways. So a little bit faster, I'm not going to go full speed. Come here like this, up. And you can hit all the way up to the ribs if you want to. I find that generally you probably hit a sword, shield edge or something like that if you go up that high. But it's a fun little thing. If you're a small fighter and you can sort of come in ducking right past the edge of your opponent's shield and come up into that, all they're going to see is your hand and the sword going up. And if they react like this, you got it. Okay, this one, it was actually useful a lot more in a long time ago, but I still keep it around because what the hell. Okay, so I said earlier that I like to use combinations to come into a wrap. So I've come to here like this and thrown over here. So I really got things playing over on this side. And then I come here and I start to go this way. And if I'm lucky, if the opponent actually turns that way like this to block the wrap. And what I do is when I take that step, then I step back and hit him somewhere. It's actually pretty slick if somebody will fall for it. If you get the guys your opponent who really likes to do this thing to stop a wrap, give them plenty of time when you're doing that so they can really get their defense set up and thereby move their sword and shield out of the way for you. Okay, so that's all the variations. I would suggest that the ones you might want to use more are the Molinet, the ones where you just aim slightly up. If you're coming in to throw a wrap, and you're even throwing a wrap, it's going to be coming up probably about this angle. And that's just about perfect. You just come up that angle and let the thing come up over the head and come around like this. Now, the interesting thing we found is you basically end up you're in what the position would be of your arm, like you just throw a snap. The blade starts to come around that circle, and now it's pulling back. So if you just push on your arm, your hand will stay in that same place. So you can throw that thing without your hand coming back. No risk involved. Pretty much I let go of the bottom fingers, hold the top fingers. Because I'm not applying power, I'm just holding on to the damn thing. So the Molinet and the S shot, the X shot, if you're fighting against open form heater, the X and the S are so damn close to each other, you can go back and forth, but the S is more versatile. Okay, so that is the wrap, or the wraps. Okay, this next section is basically a whole bunch of little tips. Anybody that reads Heinlein, it's like sayings of Lazarus Long, and there's just a bunch of things that only vaguely stick together, but they all good information. Okay, but this one's important. First one, it's a general tip. If you're in range, you should be swinging. I mean, from the moment you are in range, your sword should already be moving into a swing, or already have done one and going into the next one. And while you're in range, you never stop. You never stop. You can adjust your position by just waddling around right in front of you if you want to do that, but you don't stop. If you stop in range, then you're either wrestling or you're playing who's quickest, depending on how close you are. Don't start in range. Okay, if you actually walk into range or just right on the edge of the range where either one of you or your opponent can lean forward and hit the other one, you're playing a game of who's quickest. This is not a real high percentage of pursuit, especially for somebody like me. Like, I have a reputation for being really, really fast. I can make swords move really, really fast. I can't make my hands move very fast. I can do that little slappy game like this. I gave up that playing that about 30 years ago because I just never won. So if you're in range, basically, it's who's got the fast hands, fast twitch muscles. Sure, I can read the guy, but I may not have time to even react to him at that range. So I don't go in that range unless I'm already swinging. Once things are starting to swing, I can read the flow of the fight moving to certain points. My game on defense is I actually start my defense right about the time you figure out what you're going to do. So I'm going to do this, and I'm already moving in the block for it. Not terribly fast in my hands. All that said, learn the range line. If you don't know where the range line of both you and your opponent are, you're in trouble. For instance, I have two squires up here. One's about 6'8" and weighs about 4 1/4. He fights glaive, 7.5 foot glaive. So you can guess what kind of reach he has with thrust. Basically, it's like you're fighting a pike. And he is so accurate at his longest range without just taking a big step and holding the tip of the thing. Anything that he can go like this with and step or whatever, he can pick which nostril he's going to hit. Really, really good. You want to know where his range line is. You really do. Otherwise, you'll get about a foot before you made what you think is his range line, and he'll hit you. Now, if you like to play around on the range line, and you're not the best fighter running around, and you're fighting a much better fighter, you do not want to creep around the range line. In that case, your best defense is to go to offense. So you want to get into offense just as fast as you can, and you want it to be continuous. You don't want to throw a blow and then try to fake him out, throw another one and try to fake him out. You're not going to. If you get somebody good enough, they're just going to sit there and look at you, and the first time you make a mistake, they'll hit you, and you won't even come close. So throw the sword, come in back of your sword. I tell people, throw your first shot at their sword. You don't even have to stop in range. You can stop that 1 foot out like I was talking about earlier. But reading the flow is your only chance. If you're going to try to play who's quickest or who can execute a technique the other one doesn't have a clue how to stop, you're in the wrong game. Okay, when you swing, you're swinging something, you actually want to hit something. So if I asked everybody who was taught swing through the target to raise their hand, probably everybody listening would raise their hand. Problem with that. One is the force of the blow is a mass going at a speed, but then that impact, the energy produced is divided by the time of contact. So if you come in and you hit and you're still applying power all the way down to here, you may have contact for a couple seconds and your power is being spread all over that. You know, it's not going to get pretty much down to getting hit with a pillow, but and it'll probably knock you like crazy. And somebody doing that is probably going to hit you hard enough. But if you're fighting a better fighter, that's not going to help you. Basically, they'll just take your overcommitment and go around the other side of it. You may hit their shield, but that's all that's going to happen. So don't swing through. What I do is I aim about an inch inside the target, and then I throw it like it's a whip, like that. Pop, like that. I can actually throw a full speed snap aimed about 2 inches outside a helmet. It will simply stop. Not good on my tendons back here, so I'm not going to show you. And all the other thing that's bad about swinging through, since I can deliver all my power in 1/10 of a second when it hits, and then start going into my next technique. So I started getting into my next technique right here. You started getting in your next technique down here, and you have to come all the way back to here before you're actually moving at the same speed I am, and you're probably not. So if you want to give me an extra shot every time we swing first blows, go ahead, swing through. So here's one in movement. If you need to close range and you want to swing a blow, and you step with your back foot as you're applying power. Now you can apply power and then step with your back foot, but if you're applying power as you're stepping, you're not swinging, you're pushing. And that will be reflected in the speed of your sword, which will be considerably less than anything that remotely resembles a snap, because that's not a snap anymore, it's a push. So don't step with your back foot unless you have the technique of applying power and then stepping, coming in after it. And even so, you're going to lose some power. I pretty much use the stepping with the back foot only when I'm coming in on something that I have to approach and land around like a great weapon. And I'll put the power in, the weight will come to the front foot, and then I'll step in behind it because it's ballistic about that. So right about here, the blade, I'm not applying power. It's pulling my hand forward. Then I can step in because it doesn't make any difference. Okay, so this happens sword shield against sword shield, but I see it more a sword shield guy wants to come in on a great weapon. So you're fighting my monster squire with his glaive, and you crouch down behind your shield and run in. What you've done is you've just committed your sword and shield to an immobile position that they have to cock before they even swing from. And you've committed yourself to going on that line straight through your opponent. Your opponent doesn't have to wait around for you. So when you use your shield as you're pushing your shield and getting behind it so it'll protect you, it only protects you if they swing at the shield. I'm not going to. But then again, I'm not going to be in front of you when you get there either. So if you want to take a great weapon, you actually swing with your sword. And this time you can swing almost the same time you step almost the same time you swing, because you're not trying to actually do any power. What you're trying to do is get in range, like say a glaive, without getting stuck. So what I'll do, let's say the glaive is, here's my opponent and the glaive is coming right straight out from him. I'll swing a real sidearm blow that comes all the way in like this. And it's not a swing, it's a moving block. Blade remains vertical, comes across. Hopefully I've centered right on their glaive. So the shaft of their glaive is there, my sword is crossing it. And as I do that, since I'm swinging a sidearm, as it comes around to the inside, I let it pull me out of the thrust range. And then I just follow up the glaive, use my shield to scrape off the glaive off my sword, and then I go to town. I really wish I could pay to have my big squire travel around. He's a really good object lesson about why you shouldn't do that. Okay, something on defense. Protect your territory. I see so many people, they're fighting somebody, like their opponent's coming in from that direction. And they're here like this, and when they see him coming, they go like this. They crouch in on themselves. About the only thing they can do is walk backwards slowly. And if you walk backwards from an opponent who's moving forward, nothing changes. You just make it so it's really hard for you to swing. So you want to protect your territory. When they get in, when their head crosses that range, this is how far you can swing. So right there is your range line. When their head is approaching, your sword should be right about here moving towards it. So right when they cross, they get hit. And then they're not jumping down your neck, your throat, and something like that. They're having to defend now. And as soon as you throw that blow, you can step to the side. They have to pay attention to what's coming at their head. They may actually lose track of you for just a little bit. Okay, the slide step I keep mentioning, and I showed you earlier on, it seems like a simple little technique, but actually it changes the tactics for the whole fight. If I can attack you from out of range, it makes it a lot more difficult on you, because you don't know whether when I come forward, whether I'm going to be in range or out of range, or just partway in between. What I like to do is I like to do that slide step in close enough, not so I can hit my opponent, but that I can hit their shield. Because I use this other technique called commitment swings. And this doesn't mean I'm going to commit to really swinging hard and fast. This causes your opponent to commit. So if I'm coming in for a snap that actually is going to turn into a molinet, I'm not going to come in range to hit you. I'm going to come in range so you'll react. So if I'm swinging this thing in, it's coming right for your head. You're going to do something like this. You may not move fully into that block, but you're going to move a little bit. If nothing else, you're going to think about blocking that. However, it's not a snap, is it? It's something else. That molinet I showed you off the wrap, you can do it off a snap too. And you can do where you come here like this and come across and hit way down there. There's a lot of things I can be doing. But you just come in to the point where you cause your opponent to commit. basically, if they commit, that means they had to stop and think about it. Thinking about it during the fight is really bad, because your conscious mind can't handle the speed of the fights, but the conscious mind has absolute control over it. It has absolute control over whether it's going to run the fight or the subconscious is going to run the fight. And as soon as you think, your conscious mind takes control, and your effective reaction speed drops by a factor of 10. So you don't want to think. So I just made my opponent think. So they made a slight movement or even thought about blocking that, and then it went somewhere else. And they don't know where, because they're looking at that spot where it came close. Puts them in a little bit of a dilemma. Then I do a concept called, along with commitment swings, called parallel circles. I draw 2 circles around my opponent. If I've got my front foot on the inner circle, I can hit them. If I've got my front foot on the outer circle, I can hit their shield or hit around their shield, so I can throw these weird ass fakes. I can actually come in only to the outer circle and move around, throw 3 or 4 blows, always staying on that outer circle. And then right when I come, right about here, I see it's going to make it in, and then I just slide forward a little bit. Nasty little set of things. So you don't have to get in range to kill your opponent on your first swing. This makes entry a lot easier and a whole lot safer. Okay, another big one is use combinations. You know, if you want to play one shot, go ahead. There's a lot of guys that do, and there's a lot of guys that are really, really good at it. And I like the odds of me winning a little bit better than that. Let's say I do it better than the guy I'm fighting against, and I have a 5% advantage. You know, 5% is not really very good. I'd rather move out a little ways and use these weird ass things I got and have a 30% advantage. So use combinations, and combinations are not blows in a series where you cock in between. So this, that's not a combination. That's 3 different blows. 1, 2, 3. That is not a combination. Well, if you think it is, okay. I don't mind the extra time you're giving me. I throw them like this where it comes right into the next one. And I'll get, if you're doing what you're doing and I'm doing what I'm doing, I will finish my 3rd blow just about the time you're starting your 2nd. That's what you're paying for stopping in the back there. I have techniques that allow my sword to come around circles and back, and they get back there awfully, awfully fast. And when you are swinging, don't swing at your opponent's shield. Yeah, you can maybe cause them to react because you hit their shield, but so what? I like to come into that range where I'm still, you know, a foot away from them. Actually, I'm still out of their range, and I'll skip my sword off their shield or their sword, which is really nice. If you get the guys that fight this thing here, and you skip a blow off their sword, they'll go like this, and then they'll start to swing, and right there, my other blow comes in right at this angle. Okay, so all of you have a range that's most effective, and actually a position that's most effective. The position is almost always at the front corners. The range you get in that's your most effective varies a lot by physicality. So if you're really fast on your feet, you have really good reading ability, you want to be out in D range most of the time. You want to be out of sword range. That's what I do. Unless I'm feeling like playing, then I go in really close C range. If you got a good sword and shield attack and you can reach out into C range, that's where you want to play. If you have a great weapon, you stay out in D, or if you have to, you want to get into B range. So you're inside the sword shield guy's optimum range, and you're outside of where they can actually wrap you very well. If you're big and know how to throw wraps, you want to play an A. Well, you don't mind playing an A anyway. You might want to stay out and use your reach to get people, but there's ways of getting in past that. Okay, this is a tip. It doesn't mean a whole lot. You see a lot of guys that are here, and every once in a while they'll pull a shot right down that slot when it comes open. Like you got a guy's he was in the A-frame, and he moves his sword a little bit so he can get down that slot, and they swing down the slot. If you swing down, it costs you 14 inches from if you just punched right at their chest, because then the sword will come out and go right out like that. So if you swing down, you lose about 14 inches. A couple real easy moving ones. So I want to get into tells real quick. A couple moving ones. If you actually want to come in and play up close, be sure you stop at the right time. Because I've seen so many people, they're charging in behind their shield and they don't stop walking soon enough. And then they end up like this with their opponent pressing on their shield. I call it walking under the shield, and that's a pretty good description. Don't do that. If you're chasing somebody and they're doing the old slalom game, when you're chasing them, instead of stepping in back of your toes like this, turn your feet out like that. And then every time they circle away from you, this foot can push you right across the diameter of that curve. And every time they slalom, you'll actually gain a step. And it's really fun to see their eyes get really big as they can't get away from you. Okay, that's pretty much all the real good tells. There's a few others, but we don't need to. Okay, now we're getting into tells. Now, a tell is short for a telegraph, as if you send your opponent a telegraph, letting them know you're actually going to attack them. This is not a good idea. I mean, if you warn me just as soon as you're just before you attack every time, you will never touch me. You won't even touch my shield. Usually don't fight with shield. So if anything, remember I said back when the sword is the only real threat. So what do I have to respond to? If you take a step in, do I have to respond? Not necessarily. If you cock your sword, do I have to respond? No. If your sword starts moving at me, then do I have to respond? Yeah, I do. So the first thing that has to move in any attack is the sword. Now, if you're one of the guys that since they're in range and applies to play who quickest, the sword still has to move first. If you're at the long range, still has to move first. So get that into your mind. I mean, any other part of you that moves before the sword does is a tell. Now, if your sword's first move is to backwards into a cock, that's a tell too. It has to be going forward. Okay, don't commit yourself real thoroughly to any direction or pattern or particular attack. I've seen so many people, they're playing just out of range, and then they lean way over here and throw an offside blow. Okay, what did I just tell you? If anything but the sword moves first, it's a tell. So this big leaning over here, I mean, you have just thoroughly committed yourself to throwing an offside blow. You can't get out of it without really screwing yourself up. And your opponent knows exactly what you're going to do. Not a good option. One of the things that my techniques have in them is the possibility of lateral motion. So let's say I've just come in with a slide step snap. So I'm right here like this. I'm just at shield range here. And then the next technique I'm coming around here, which would still be there, except I can move sideways and in right there. And I can do it the other way too. It's just a matter of which way the sword's pointing. You're swinging back around in a circle. When the sword's pointing that way, your body is actually leaning the other way a little bit. So as soon as the sword gets past there, the pull that way goes away. If you lift up your foot then, you actually move over. But you notice my stance is upright, completely upright the whole time, which allows me to move anywhere I want to, swing any kind of blows I want to with all the power of my core. One of the real bad ones is cocking your weapon, not cocking your weapon in your guard position. Okay, so you like this. It's a good defensive position. Okay, why is it a good defensive position? Well, I like to start in range, which I told you not to do. And if I don't have my sword here, I can't block Paul's snaps. So I got to have my sword here. How about you use a slide step so I'm a little ways away? So you're here like this, and I won't come into range to play this game with you. So every time you want to swing at me, you have to go like this. Okay, the sword was moving backwards. That's a tell. I'm not going to be there when your sword comes forward. One of the real bad commitments is leaning when you swing. Now, big athletic, strong guys can make it work anyway. But if you lean forward, you're actually disengaging your core. So those of you that aren't big, strong, and fast, it's not going to do you well. And a lot of people, this is an interesting thing. I've had this story actually told to me why this came into account. It was because of my snap. And people didn't have the slide step. They didn't know about it. Most people these days don't know about it. And they didn't want to be really in range. So they sit right at the edge of the range line. And they use their sword foot forward, which is not necessarily a bad thing. And then they lean really slowly. And then they at some point, they're in range to do that little flicky thing. Okay. Who do you think you're going to beat with that technique? You going to beat me? Nobody ever did. It's sort of like, it's so obvious if you're paying attention. I saw this little video on TV. It was a zookeeper washing off the elephants. And behind her, there's an elephant creeping up really slowly towards another host, so he's going to squirt her. She catches a side of her eye out of him and chases him away. Turns back to the camera and says, they think if they move really slowly, you won't see them. And that sounds like sort of a similar thing here. So that slow lean is not going to really help you too much. If you have a really good reason to lean, then go ahead. But do some kind of analysis sometime before the fight as to what your reward's going to be, what's the likelihood you're going to get caught, and what are they going to do to you if they do catch you. If it doesn't balance, you shouldn't be doing that kind of stuff. If you're coming from outside the range and you step towards somebody and you bob every time you step, people like me can time your movements. So every time you're at the top and start to go down, I swing a head shot. Every time you're at the bottom going up, I swing a body shot. You're not going to be able to block it because you're committed here, committed here. If you just stand right back and just flat out run at your opponent, and they don't make that reflexive step back and let you chase them, but instead swing at you and step to the side, you have no defense. You can't change much of anything. You're going that direction. Your weapon and shield will be going in that direction. Your opponent is 3 feet to your left or your right, whichever. Okay, pretty much any kind of extra movement is a tell. Or it's not necessarily a tell, it's just information to your opponent. I like just to stand still. I don't move around. If you can do it right, stillness is harder to read than movement. A lot harder to read. There's a couple dangers to it. Like I had a student. He was actually a count, and back in my days of Sword and Shield, and we'd be fighting, and those little pauses that occurred during fights, and I'd make sure we we paused on guard and just barely in sword range. And I could read this guy really well. So he's like this. He's really like this, and he's really on the defensive. And then he gets tired of it, and he goes, "You just told me he was going to swing." And right then is when I'd hit him. If you can make somebody hold it a little longer, and they're really defensive, and you see their shoulders go down. They're now holding up their weapon and shield. They are not going to block what you throw. If you're somebody that likes to throw feints, the first part of the feint has to be a threat. So that means the sword has to move, doesn't it? So what do you call a shoulder feint? What a lot of people call a rising snap, it isn't. It's a tell. So I've seen so many people that say they're throwing rising snaps, which I invented way back when. And I'll stand a little over this way so you can see what I'm doing. So this is what's considered a rising snap. You put your shoulder down and then you throw up. So big deal. If I were doing my punch block, I would make the same block in the case, and I'd block it. What I used to do for a rising snap is I would pull the sword out from my shoulder. At the same time, I would lean sideways. Now, if you keep your hips inside your knees, inside your feet, your core still works. If you lean forward, you're done. If you get outside of that knee, your core isn't working anymore. But here it still is. And what I would do is I would try to get just a few inches of forward motion in that, but I hadn't really committed anything in the world. My body, nothing. So it would actually come down here, and then I would move my hip and shield up, and it would come up. So it looks sort of like this. Tip was all the way down here, just a fraction of a second before up there. But the first thing that moved was the sword. If I just leaned sideways and moved the sword, it wouldn't have the same effect. Probably my opponent would step to the other way and it wouldn't even be able to reach him. If you like doing a lot of feints, be a little careful. You may have a pattern in your feints so that this one little sequence of feints means you're going to do this. People pick up on that, especially if you have one little thing that you do every time you're going to throw a shot. So every time you do a shot, you can sort of move your shield open a little bit. I was once, way back when I was still fighting, toward the end of my career, I was fighting Duke Thorne at Penzig, who was in a lot better practice than I was, but I was winning like 2 out of 3, 2 out of 5, you know. And then I saw his tell. He rotated his hand about a quarter inch just before he was going to swing. And I took his arm, and then I was too tired to fight anymore anyway. So, Duke Thorne is probably one of my student with the best success story, but there have been a few others too. And don't do the same thing over and over and over and over again. Pretty much, you get so your opponent can rely on it. Yeah, you could change it up, but most of the time you're not going to. And your opponent can take advantage of this. So here's a whole lot of tells I just gave you, things that you have to avoid, things that you have to do to get the drop on your opponent. But your opponent does these things too. So start paying attention to what's going on. Here's a drill for you. Get partners, and one person's got their sword shield, the other partner doesn't. And the partner that doesn't stands there like this, at whatever distance you want to start. And the other person launches an attack. They don't follow through with it. But as soon as this person here sees a tell, it goes like that. And then you talk about it because you want to get better. But that's a very, very effective way to get rid of your tells and to start being able to pick up on other people's. And that's a real advantage to having a fight. And that's the end of my class.
That was fabulous. I am cutting my video back on. How are you? That was a great class.
Made it.
We made it. Thank you you so much for being here. And I know we won't have you back in the immediate future because you have some things that you have on your agenda coming up.
Mainly a back operation.
Yes, a back operation is definitely a little intimidating to think about. So, our best wishes will be with you during that time.
I'm actually looking forward to it. I've had a back operation at this hospital with this surgeon, and it was brilliantly successful.
Good.
My experience in the hospital was so good that my wife and I were joking about having our next vacation.
Oh, that's like nobody ever says that about hospitals. I will come to your hospital one day if I have to get anything done.
Oh, it's just incredible. It really is. Best medical experience of my life.
Well, we will keep you in our thoughts as you go through that, and as you recover, possibly brainstorm some more things you could share with us because you have incredible knowledge and we're all hungry for
Thank
it.
you. I try to think up things and make correlations.
That
Thank
would
you
be
so much
wonderful.
for putting on these things. The whole fighting community is in debt to you. Uh,
Thank you.
so thank you.
Well, it's not possible without you all to do it, so we're a team.
Yes, sir. There you
All right, have a lovely evening, and I will be in touch with you. We'll see you soon.
go. Okay. Bye, everybody.
Bye.